And I'm really glad. So we're scheduling to do this next Thursday, or
Okay.
release it. And it just so happens, so we are breaking up two topics of horror and the Cthulhu mythos. And my partner actually planned this out last year, and just coincidentally, it falls in that we're talking about Glocky.
Oh, really? Gosh, okay, okay.
So yeah, I think that's great timing there. So
Absolutely. Mind you, Glaki is technically the way to pronounce the old guy, I think, because there's an apostrophe in there.
oh, thank you. Uh, I have to admit, until someone actually pronounced it, and I read it, and I'm notorious for doing things wrong. I read it like Glakai,
Ah, okay, okay.
but
Yes,
but um but thank you so much. Um, okay, so all right. If do you have any questions for me?
no, no, you carry on. We'll carry on.
Okay, then we will. I'm going to go ahead and start the show, and we'll see if a rooster interrupts us.
Absolutely.
So we are really excited about a guest that we have today, and that is Ramsey Campbell. And Mr. Campbell, I think I may have mentioned this. You know, I was going through a period of my life where it wasn't bad. In fact, it was a lot better than I thought. But it's the first time in my life where I discovered me time. And some of your books were some of the first things that I started reading when I started developing me time. And I'm sure people tell you this all the time, but just how grateful I was that I could have something to sort of escape the problems I thought were so big that now, 20 years later, look so small. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for having me as well.
Well, thank you. So I'm also excited because you've got a new trilogy, a third book out on the trilogy.
That's right.
Uh, can you tell our audience a little bit about this?
Yeah, well, should we talk about the trilogy in general to begin with, maybe, huh?
Would we
Um,
please?
yes, okay. Well, let me say this. It was I have to thank my great friend Pete Crowther, he of PS Publishing here in Britain, because it was as a very basically it was his idea, to the extent that he came to me years ago. Now I imagine we're probably talking about something like 10 years ago, at a convention, where we often meet up, and he thought somebody ought to write a cosmic horror trilogy, basically. Well, he felt I should do it. Now, I was initially very resistant to this, not because I don't want to do cosmic terror, which is a favorite thing of mine, but I just basically felt there has to be a reason to write a trilogy, not just a very long novel that you then chop into three separate volumes. There's got to be a reason why it is in three volumes. And well, for quite a while, for years, I suppose, it seemed to me that I couldn't find one. Eventually, though, it occurred to me that, Mel, what about following the central characters across most of their lives? So, the first volume begins in the 50s, when they're in their early adolescence. The second volume is set in the mid 1980s, when they're now in adulthood, and the third, well, is in their late years, in fact, and it's coming up to something like the present. Although actually, I mean, I wasn't to anticipate the pandemic or anything like the disasters that are surrounding us now. Although it does turn pretty apocalyptic in its own way, and in parallel with these three central characters, Dominic and his friends Jim and Bobby Roberta, we have this cult, the cult of run by Christian Noble, which is basically the cult of Deoloth, although disguised initially as a kind of spiritualist church, that is gaining in power over the three successive volumes. And by the way of the worm, which is the one which is now just imminent, out this very week. The cult is out there in plain sight. It's got palatial accommodation on the Liverpool waterfront and elsewhere all over the world, and it's politicians and various dignitaries and celebrities freely, openly acknowledge their membership in it, and the fact it's still keeping secrets about exactly what it does doesn't prevent it from being really just kind of overlooked, although it's in plain sight, or not, not seen for what it is. Which obviously, heaven help us, is what we're seeing all over the world. The kind of descent into irrationality, and the espousement of cults, particularly the kind that will answer all your questions so long as you give up the right to ask any. And so these were some of the things I had in mind in the trilogy. And I'll add to this, I suppose, that there's a parallel with Christian Noble and his developing family, his daughter and grandson, who again, of course, gain in age as the 3 volumes progress, and again they become a much more powerful entity, and ultimately, reveal something either less or more than human about them. And, basically I'm trying to work my way through my own mythos that I created, gosh, when I think about it, when I was 16 years old, in parallel, if you like, with Lovecraft's mythos, or if you like, my own little contribution to it. Because back then, when I wrote my first Lovecraftian stories, I didn't just want to recycle Lovecraftian entities. Because I felt, he'd already done those better than anybody else could. I wanted to try and invent things of my own. Whether I was equipped to do them justice when I was in my mid-teens, I seriously doubt, which is why I've come back to them again.
Interesting and fascinating. And just for those who are listening and are excited, could we get the names of the different novels so that our audience can go, and if they haven't read the first 2, look for those, but also that the third one is out now.
Yes, just out right now. Well, the first one is The Searching Dead, and that's the one that's set in the 1950s and very much draws upon my experience of living in Liverpool back then. So while it's not strictly autobiographical, a lot of the detail certainly is, from my observation and memory. And in that one, the cult exists as the Trinity Church of the Spirit, which is purports to be a kind of spiritualist church that will put you in touch with your lost loved ones, but is in fact using the recently dead as a sort of proxy to go into places where the cultists would not dare to go. And it's kind of, if you like, it's my variation on the case of Charles Dexter Ward, the bringing back to life and the use of the dead. Born to the Dark is the second volume, in which Dominic has now, as I say, has grown up, got married, had a son, only to discover that the son is being drawn in, the very young son is being drawn into what is now the new face of this cult. And in the Way of the Worm, as I said, it's now out there in open sight as the Church of the Eternal Three. But the Eternal Three, it sort of reinterprets the Bible in terms of Deoloth, my old render of the Veils, my early creation, if you like. And is basically leading to an apocalypse. And well, I think I did manage to deliver, the cosmic by the end of that novel. Certainly hope so, anyway.
Excellent. And in fact, you're actually, Campbell Country is sort of synonymous for taking cosmic horror and putting it in your own backyard. It's even a codified trope. What were some of maybe these books, but originally books, what were some of the things maybe growing up or you experienced that helped you create the current situation, but also the Severn Valley?
Well, that was more August Derleth's recommendation. You see, when I wrote the first draft of those stories that were collected, as The Inhabitant of the Lake, that first Arkham House book of mine, they were set in Lovecraft country. They were set in Massachusetts, Arkham, Dunwich, and so forth. Now, Derth quite rightly said, well, what I needed to do was to relocate them to England, somewhere I knew better, because it was very evident that had never been outside England and knew nothing about Lovecraft's country other than what I'd read in Lovecraft himself. Now, actually, little did Derth know that I'd never been to the Severn Valley either. So my version of that was pretty fantastical too, or at least, it was at the very most, it was a kind of basic sketch of the place based on books that I'd read. And it wasn't until years later that I went there and found, well, in some ways it wasn't altogether unlike what I'd invented, but all that was based on research, not personal observation and experience. But at least, I did create somewhere new. Now, when I think about it, I could have gone to Chester, which is a lot nearer where I live, and I could have visited that, and that area was similar. Because Derth did make this point that, it was an old Roman area, and that, the kind of Roman practices, the darker Roman practices could be incorporated into the ideas behind it, which was a fine idea of his, and I did try and do that. But basically, I invented most of the legends, but pretty well all of them. Well, no, actually, to be fair, the room in the castle, the thing about the Berkeley toad, that is a real legend actually, and so is the witch of Berkeley. So even in those early days, I was trying to incorporate bits of actual legend. I mean, later
folklore of the area.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, those were the only two I really found. I mean, the rest of it is pretty well invented. But the other thing you see, I feel about those earlier stories is that I feel sort of guilty. I've always felt guilty that what I did was I took some of Lovecraft's ideas which he had not used, because as I say, I didn't want to recycle ones that he had used. But I took bits out of the Commonplace book, and I took old Shubnigurath, to pronounce him correctly, I hope, and basically invented a description of him, because I asked Earth about this, and he couldn't think of any description Lovecraft had made of that particular entity. Now, in fact, Lovecraft did describe it to some extent in a letter, but it's possible Earth had forgotten that, and it was not one that he reprinted in the selected letters, I don't think, or certainly not by the time I was discussing it with him. So I came up and made up a shape for the creature, but frankly, I don't think I really did it. I don't think I was capable at the age of 16 to do that proper justice. And the one I've always regretted was the insects from Shigay or Shigai, I forget, depending on how you want to pronounce that. Now, that's based on a Lovecraft, I think I'm correct in saying, was the very last note Lovecraft put in his Commonplace book. It was based on this tremendous dream he had of walking in the woods near Providence, or certainly in a forest anyway, and meeting a swarm of insects which penetrated his skull and immediately set off their own memories of alien vistas, and other planets, other worlds, and so forth. It's a tremendous idea, one of Lovecraft's most evocative. But the thing was, he meant just a swarm of insects, not a swarm of giant insects that travel around in spacecraft, which is what, unfortunately, I did with the idea. And I regretted that for decades. And so I tried to rescue it in a novel of mine it's actually round about the turn of the century, called The Darkest Part of the Woods. And so I tried to use that idea again with I hope, a bit more reticence and a bit more kind of delicacy. And also, I would just mention that, again, The Darkest Part of the Woods was a novel of mine where the template was effectively the case of Charles Dexter Ward. And I actually, refer in passing to Joseph Curwen in the hope that people will spot the reference.
Wow, yeah, and now I'm going to go ahead and reread it, and I'm going to have a completely different perspective.
Okay.
What other ways? I mean, just obviously as a human being, as we grow older, we change.
Yes.
What other ways do you think maybe you've changed as a writer?
Well, I mean, I suppose the less dependence on Lovecraft. Certainly, in the early days, I was pastiching Lovecraft in the early stories, the early Lovecraftian stories that I did. Although even there, it's kind of interesting to me that I seem to have worked through most of the Lovecraftian modes in those early ones. So that the something like the Church in High Street is his kind of florid style. The Insect from Chicago is very much a sort of pulp kind of a story, but it also tries to do the history of an alien race that you find in At the Mountains of Madness, for instance.
Hmm.
The Horror from the Bridge has a more sort of sober style, so that's beginning to try and embrace his documentary
Which is
approach.
personally one of my favorite.
Oh, thank
Sorry, I
you very
didn't mean to
much.
interrupt you, but I love that story.
Thank you. And then from that point onward, really the stories begin to move away, and well, they don't sound that much like me, but they don't sound quite so much like Lovecraft. And even in something like the Will of Stanley Brooke, I was trying to find out. This is something I do it every so often, just as a sort of exercise to see what will happen. To do without something that I depend on as a writer for the duration of a story, and see what happens then. And of course, the Will of Stanley Brooke is written very, very largely in dialogue and with a completely flat, affectless prose with no, deliberate avoidance of atmosphere and that sort of a thing. To see what would happen if I did that. Now, again, you see, I don't think I was equipped to do it because the characters really come out as a kind of, the sort of characters you would find in a second-rate country house detective story. But it was an attempt to do it. Even then,
Sure.
I was trying to develop what I did. And then gradually, other stuff like, say, cold print, I began to incorporate decidedly non-Lovecraftian kinds of people, in a Lovecraftian story. I think that was one of the moves that I made. And later on, I've come back to more to my mythos, if you like, my little kind of Brichester mythos, and tried to do it in terms of the way I approach things now. I am sort of fond of the last revelation of Da'aki, that novella I did, because I think that tries to turn it into a sort of comedy of paranoia, which is something I've gone in for over the decades since. But also, I had a lot of fun with it. But I do hope it also ultimately works as a kind of accumulation of Lovecraftian suggestions that eventually delivers an appropriately spectacular finale, and brings back Aki, and again, I hope does it a bit more justice than I could at 16 years old.
Yes, no, excellent. Now, I wonder though, not only you, but what do you think? Sort of asking to look into your crystal ball now, but what do you think the future of horror, or maybe the future of your writing, is going to be like?
Well, you see, I'm often asked that question, but I have no such prescience. I mean, I suppose my flippant answer is if I knew what the future of horror was going to be, I'd do it, and not tell anybody else till I'd done it. But, I really don't know. And all I can say about myself is, I try not to repeat myself. I try to develop as a writer. I'm never satisfied with what I've done really well. Sometimes I'm for a little while, and then I come back and look at it and think, yeah, I could have done that better. And so, rather than try and rewrite it, which I don't, which I try not to do, again,
Sure.
I would rather try and develop maybe that theme again in a different way and see if I can get it, that little bit better. As far as the field is concerned, though, again, I don't know, and I always resist naming people who I admire because I always think, as soon as I finish doing it, I'm going to think, oh Lord, no, I left them out, and those two guys as well. But what I can say is, I really genuinely think that we're in another golden age of the field. There's an enormous amount of vigorous talent out there at the moment. Both in the mainstream, mass market, and also certainly in the independent sector. I mean, there are lots of very fine small presses, who are doing splendid work and supporting, very, very talented writers. So, I think we're obviously seeing more diversity in the field, more new and varied voices, which it could only be a healthy thing. So, I mean, and I don't know what the future is going to be, but I hope I live to see it.
You know, and that's kind of my answer. I mean, I I I I am just so curious sometimes, and between personally, I kind of
Yeah.
hope I'm surprised. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
I'm a terrible person. I love being a know-it-all and telling everybody, but I
Yes.
kind of like to be surprised with the new stuff's coming out.
Sure, sure. And I mean, I must admit, for me, this is a different thing, I know, but my thing, whenever I come to my desk where I'm talking to you right now, I'm up here, well, I'm by sort of 6 in the morning usually, 7 days a week. But whenever I'm writing a new draft, particularly, and even when I'm rewriting, but particularly a new first draft, I want to surprise myself. I want to write something I didn't know I was going to write till I wrote it, and I hope that that it comes that way across to the reader as well.
Excellent. Now, this is kind of our signature question for the show.
Mhm.
We always sort of finish up the interview portion with this question.
Yes.
Um, if you could be put of any creative project, um, any medium, don't worry after about money, don't have to worry about copyrights. You have complete charge. What is your dream project?
Well, I was a bit stumped on that for a while because I knew you were going to ask it. But I actually, when I think about it, yes, I do have a sort of dream project. As long as we're fantasizing, well, let's hope it happens anyway. If I, had unlimited funds and unlimited, people to employ and all that stuff, I would get together a team of searchers and researchers who could track down the original preview print of Orson Welles' film The Magnificent Ambersons, because what I don't know if you know about this, but what happened to that film is, to my mind, the greatest act of vandalism in the history of the cinema, because basically it was pretty well a 2-hour movie, the one he made after Citizen Kane. The sneak preview got some very bad kind of opinion cards from the audience. So RKO, who produced it, took it away from Wells, cut half an hour out of it, put on a happy ending, re-edited various sequences, and that's the version we live with now. And what
Yeah.
you can see now is like 2/3 of a masterpiece. Basically, it would, I think, have been as great as Citizen Kane in its own way. Now, who knows? I mean, out there somewhere in a shed in Brazil or something like that, maybe, there's that one existing copy, because supposedly they did send a copy of the preview print to Wells himself, who was over there shooting another film. And after all, not so very long ago, in I think it wasn't a shed or something like this, a print of Fritz Lang's film Metropolis
Yeah,
was
I think that was
discovered.
Argentina.
Yeah, well, with an entire 20-minute subplot that nobody's ever seen since it was originally released. And, now we've got that. So maybe somewhere out there is that one copy of the Magnificent Ambersons. And, once we find it, then, people like UCLA and their team of restorers can get to work on it. And maybe in my lifetime, they will find that one thing and I'll be able to watch it. So that would be my dream. Hope it
You know
comes.
what? And if you do that, sort of my dream would be to make a documentary about how it was found.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, of course, that's true.
Well, we really appreciate your time here, and I have just really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, me too.
Anything you'd like to share with our audience before we sign off?
Well, I guess I was saying say this, and maybe I can come back and talk about it to you later on, But the next novel up, which will be out in September, is a book called Fell Stones. That's just one word, Fell Stones, right? And it's another. I think it's another novel of cosmic terror, And I think you will spot that again. In the background, looming is a particular Lovecraft story. I won't say which one it is, but I think I hope I've put in enough acknowledgement of what it reminded me of when I was writing it for nobody to accuse me of of just sort of barefaced plagiarism, because I think it's more to it than that.
Yeah, no. There's a big difference between inspiration and plagiarism, and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure you didn't cross the line.
No, I don't think so. To be honest, I sort of came at the idea independently. And while I was writing it, I thought, hang on, this is such and such by Lovecraft, in a way, it's my version of it. But, so there's another cosmic horror coming from me later this year. And, well, I hope folk enjoy that one too.
Well,
And
thank
I'll
you
tell you one
so
more
much.
thing.
And we
Oh,
will, I'm sorry,
sorry, you can edit out that. I'm sorry, beg your pardon, I talked across you. I'll surprise you with one last thing if you like. Uh,
please.
okay. And in a completely different vein, and to shock you, I hope in the best way, the other thing that I've got in the pipeline right now, and very close to completing, is a 70,000 word study of the Three Stooges.
Oh, so again, probably much more personal than you want. I grew up in the 70s in the LA market. And so all these independent TV stations would buy the Three Stooges and things like that, um, and show them. And so you're talking about my childhood.
Oh, well, okay. Well, you see, my book is about how I came to appreciate them very gradually, over the decades. But the more I looked at them, the more fascinated I become, and also the more I think, it's complete. It's actually, I'll tell you what, there is a connection here because I'd say it's just about as wrong to say about, Lovecraft that all he ever did was say that things were indescribable, use words like eldritch and amorphous and tentacled. I mean, we all know how unfair and unreasonable that is, and how much more there is to Lovecraft than that. Like, a very modulated use of language and a supreme sense of structure. Well, I'd say it's just as unfair to say about the Three Stooges that all they're about is knocking each other about, because there's a great deal more to them than that. And the more I looked, the more I saw. And actually, I tell you, the book is called Six Stooges and Counting, because obviously there were more than three. That's one of the most.
Carly Joe and
Yes,
Champ.
exactly. That's right. So this is a personal appreciation, and maybe it'll be out this year, but very soon anyway.
Excellent. Well, we would love to have you on again, not only talk about your new horror writing, but
Mhm.
I would love to have a Three Stooges conversation with you.
We're on. You're on, David. Fair enough. We'll do it.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
That was an amazing interview. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Yeah, but so just real quickly, so the LA market, they would do the Three Stooges and Oliver and Hardy
Uh-huh.
because they could buy them cheap, and they
Yes.
would put them in the parts between like the cartoons and the news. So
Yes.
we all in that area just grew up, and we knew that they were like old because they were black and white.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all the kids at school, it was kind of like, well, they're talking to, we knew they were old, but we didn't quite
Yeah.
realize that it wasn't us.
Yes. 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 Yeah. No, no, no. So, I mean, well, I mean, Sony. So Sony. I don't know if you saw this, but they released a consecutive series, in sort of slipcase sets of the whole of their career.
Hmm.
About 8 sets, I think, and I bought all those. And then, to be good for Sony, they also brought out a kind of backup set, which has individual films by Shemp and Joe Besser and Curly Joe, so you can see the sort of context of them. Um,
Okay.
and also, I think it was Sony again brought out the very early shorts, some of them in color actually, early two-strip Technicolor, when they were the Stooges of the straight man, or relatively straight man, which is where they got the Stooges down from in the first place.
Yeah.
And nearly all of those are now restored, so you get them. And so I've been able to write about all that too as well.
Oh yeah, no, I'm definitely going to look forward to that because yeah, I'm my major is in history, so I grew
Ah,
up in the LA area, so I love film history. I will
yes,
definitely be
yes,
looking
yes.
for that book.
Okay, well, near the time we'll by all means talk about it. Yeah.
Excellent. And I'm going to get this over to our producer. I'll give you a notice when it goes out, but more than likely it will go out Thursday.
Okay, good. And let me just apologize once again for having messed you about, by the way.
No, no, it actually things fell into place and it works better this way. So thank you. It's
Oh,
it's
good.
perfect. Thank
Okay,
you.
excellent. My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right. Well, have a great left of the day that you have there. I know it's almost evening, and thank you so much.
My pleasure, David. Great to speak to you. Speak to you again.
Thank you.